Peace be with you. I decided to make this video in regards to a very important topic that is addressed in the Quran, and that topic is importance of keeping our word as Muslims. As all my other videos, this video is mainly targeted at people who consider themselves Muslims because this is important to them. This is how they should live their life. I also hope if anybody who does not consider themselves a Muslim sees this, they will understand what God actually revealed in the Quran, because the Quran is one of the most misrepresented books in the world today. And this is so by people who hate Islam and also those who profess extreme love for it. Is just a lot of people are ignorant of the Quran, so this is why I make these videos. So what does God say about keeping our word in the Quran? This is a very, very important topic. So in the Quran, God tells us that keeping our word is one of the most loved qualities by Him, and not keeping it is one of the most detestable things to God. So in chapter 61, verses 2 and 3, God tells us, O you who believe, why do you say that which you do not do? Most hateful to God is that you should say that which you do not do. So this is one of the most hateful characteristics to God if we do not keep our word. And that's simply saying, so this is what it's described as, simply saying, doing what we say. So whether you make a promise or you describe yourself, or it doesn't matter, you're supposed to keep it. And that's it. If you don't, God hates it. It is one of the most hateful things to God. As a matter of fact, God uses these characteristics to describe people who He hates, or their qualities. In chapter 8, verses 55 to 56, God says, surely the vilest of animals in God's sight are those who disbelieve, then they would not believe. And then He gives their qualities. Those with whom you make an agreement, then they break their agreement every time, and they are not careful of their duty. So although this verse references those who disbelieve, God gives their characteristics. And all of us are going to attach labels to ourselves no matter what. I mean, you have all kinds of people calling themselves Muslims, all kinds of people calling themselves Christians or Jews or Hindus, it doesn't matter. But they do not follow any of the precepts of their professed faith. And they're just like those who, they're no better than these people who disbelieve. If you are considering yourself a Muslim, but you don't keep your word, then you're no better than these people. The vilest of animals in God's sight are those with whom you make an agreement, and they break their agreement every single time, and they're not careful of their duty. So it is very important to understand this, because God condemns it and makes it so obvious how hateful it is in very strong terms. And if we're not successful in doing this, our failure is immense, and hell is our destiny. So this is the hard part of Islam. It isn't getting up in the morning and praying. It isn't fasting. Those are just tools to get to this point. This, keeping our promises, is something that is difficult. This isn't easy. You always have to be cognizant of it. You always have to be aware of it. You have to watch what you say. You have to watch what you agree to. And if you agree to something, then you have to do it. If you give your word that you're going to do something, people expect it on you. This carries a responsibility that is expected from God. God expects this from us. So conversely, I just showed you that the last two verses I recited, I showed you that God hates these characteristics, and there are several more verses in the Quran about this. God says in chapter 2, verse 177, it is not righteousness that you turn your faces toward the east or the west, but righteousness is that you should believe in God and the last day and the angels and the book and the prophets, and to give away your wealth for the love of Him to the relatives and the orphans and the needy and the traveler and beggars, and for the captives, and to keep up prayer and give zakat, and the performers of their promise when they make a promise, and the patient in the times of hardship and distress and hardship and time of conflicts, and those these are those who are true, and these are those who are careful of their duty. So this is what God says in the Quran. These are the what righteousness is described as. It isn't just turning your face toward the east or the west, following traditions and following mechanical parts or whatever. So just turning to Qibla is not righteousness. Righteousness is believing in the things I listed, and one of them is described as keeping your promises when you make a promise. And uh, God continues to describe this over and over in the Quran. And I'll just recite another verse, verse 3, chapter 3, verses 76 to 77. God says, "Yeah, whoever fulfills his promise and is careful of his duty, then surely God loves those who are careful of their duty." And then, so God says, those who fulfill their promise, God loves them. You know, and then in the same next verse, verse 77, God says, "Those who take a small price for the covenant of God and their own oaths, surely they will have no portion of the hereafter, and God will not speak to them, nor will he look upon them in the day of resurrection, nor will he purify them, and they will have a painful punishment." So those who take a small price for their oath, their promise they gave to God that they're going to obey, God will not even look at it. If you break that, God won't even look at you on the resurrection day. Won't even give you a chance to explain. You will just be cast out and be done. And this is how important it is to keep our promises to God and keep our promises to each other. Uh, and there's several more verses. I'll just mention their references right now because I want to keep this video short. Uh, you know, in chapter 13, verses 19 to 20, one of the, it is, well, this is a short verse, so I'll just recite it. "Is he then who knows what has been revealed to you from your Lord is the truth, like him who is blind? And only those possessed of understanding will mind. Those who fulfill the promise of God and do not break the covenant." So again, the importance of keeping promises is highlighted. Also in the chapter 17, verses 34, when God is talking to us about what wisdom is, and it is said, "And do not approach the property of an orphan except in the most righteous manner until they reach maturity, and keep your promises. Surely every promise shall be asked about." So our promises, keeping our word is incredibly important. And just to kind of drive this point home, a quality of the munafiqs, of the hypocrites, is that they break their promise. So in the Surah Munafiq, in the chapter called Munafiq, chapter 63, the first two verses, basically the first verse, it describes when the hypocrites come to Prophet Muhammad, they proclaim the Shahada, the proclamation of faith, you know. But and what said is, when the hypocrites come to you, they say, "We bear witness that you are most surely God's messenger." So that is the Shahada, They tell him, "Hey, you're God's messenger." And God knows that you are most surely his messenger. And God bear witness that the hypocrites are surely liars. So they're lying. They are proclaiming to be Muslims, but they are lying. And then the next verse it says, "They make their oaths a shelter, and thus turn away from God's way, and evil is that which they do." So again, a quality of a hypocrite is that they make their oaths, they make their word a shelter. They are, they don't keep their words. They lie about who they are. They lie about what they are. And this goes on in chapter 7, verses 134 to 135, when we're told about one of the most despicable people in the Quran, the Pharaoh. Basically, in this story, in these couple of verses, we're told, that every time he makes a promise to Moses that he will let his people go, every time God takes away the curse from them, he goes back on his promise. So this is a characteristic. Breaking your word is a despicable characteristic to God. One of the most despicable people in the Quran is used to drive that point home. And lastly, this isn't just an important part of the on a personal level. Keeping our word and keeping our promises and keeping to our deals is not not important just on a personal level. It is also important on a political level. So that's the last thing I'll mention. In chapter 16, verses 90 to 92, God says, surely God commands doing of justice and doing of good and given to the relatives, and he forbids indecency and rebellion. He warns you that you may be mindful. And fulfill the covenant of God when you have made a covenant. And do not break the oaths after making them. Don't break your promises after making them. And indeed you have made God guarantor for you. Surely God knows what you do. So when you say I'm a Muslim and then you give your word, you have made God a guarantor for you. You know, imagine if you make your friend a guarantor for you, and then like a co-signer for you, and then you go back on your word. You know, then your friend is, is on the hook. You know, and God isn't on the hook, but you are using God's name to justify your own lying, and God hates that. And then these verses end, and do not be like her who unravels her yarn, disintegrating it into pieces after she has spun it tightly. You make your oaths to be a means of deception between you, because a nation is more numerous than a nation. God only tries you by this, and He will most certainly make clear to you on the resurrection day that about which you differ. So, on a political level, when you're dealing nations and groups of people, they call themselves Muslims, but they lie to each other, and that's simply unacceptable. And this is why there is no cohesiveness in Muslim communities, and this is why they will continue to suffer always. So this is a very, 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 very important topic in the Quran, keeping our words on a personal level, on a political level. It is despicable to God when we break it. God won't even look at us on the resurrection day if we continue to do this. So it is very, very important for us to realize that we have to stop doing this. We have to do better. And of course, as with everything in this life, we're not going to be perfect when we first start. We're just not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to break your promise. But you have to keep trying. As with anything, any school, any sport, you have to keep training and you have to keep trying. And that is the purpose of prayer. That is the purpose of fasting. It is for us to get to this level where we're actually fulfilling these commandments that God demands from us. This is not a request. This is a demand. God is not giving us suggestions. God is giving us demands. We have to do this. We have to be people of our word if we are Muslims. And this is how important this is. So that's all I wanted to say. Hopefully this actually helps people. I hope we help each other and we hold each other accountable, because that we are supposed to do that as Muslims. So that's all. So good luck to everybody. That's it.